We've got another one that I think it's maybe a little bit more in the moment, the right now. We can have a big round of applause for Rob Bucci, everybody. Did I say that right? I get it wrong every single time. Yeah, Rob Bucci, everybody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Bucci. This is my 4th year here at Brighton SEO. I'm going to ask you guys to indulge me. Over the last 3 years that I've been here, I got in the habit of taking a photo of you all from my mom. She now expects it. She asked me, are you going to Brighton? Where's my photo? So you're going to help me deal with the crushing burden of maternal expectation. And I'm going to take a photo of you guys, okay? So do me a favor and wave from my mother. Oh, you guys are great. Awesome. All right, that's out of the way. The tradition continues. As I said, my name is Rob Bucci. I work with a company called Stat Search Analytics. We're in Vancouver, Canada. At Stat, what we do is we unlock insights and complex data to help give companies a competitive edge in the search engines. Part of how we do that is by analyzing SERPs, lots of them. Our ability to analyze SERPs at scale gives us the ability to get involved in some pretty interesting research. One of the things that we recently started looking at were featured snippets. We figured there's a lot of opportunity in these areas to be able to rank in featured snippets, and so we orchestrated a very large research project, and I'm here today to walk you through that, to show you some of the data, and to hopefully give you guys some good advice on how to get your own featured snippets. So, without further ado, you might be asking, why featured snippets? They represent a very valuable opportunity to drive organic traffic for any business that can grab them. They are an increasingly large feature of high-value SERPs. They often appear on SERPs that are relatively pristine in terms of what other universal results they co-occur with. I'll back up some of those assertions with data in just a minute. But first, I want to give you guys 3 reasons why you should get excited about featured snippets. First of all is maximum authority. Appearing in a featured snippet gives you this incredible boost of credibility in the eye of the searcher. People have found that there is a major increase on page conversions when you rank in a featured snippet because Google is like elevating you above the crowd. They are selecting you from the masses and they're putting you at position 0 above everything else on the SERP, and they're saying, this is the world's best answer to the question that you're asking. The very nature of that causes the user who is seeing that answer, that featured snippet, to think, these people really know what they're talking about. I can trust them. I should buy their product. The second one, and this was fascinating for us in the study, we realized that with featured snippets, you can leapfrog the competition. And I'll prove this with some data, but we discovered that featured snippets can be sourced from anywhere on the SERP. You don't have to rank at number 1 in order to appear in a featured snippet. You can rank at number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and still appear in the very top of the SERP. I don't know of any other opportunity in SEO that lets you just like win the game by not playing. So you can like actually skip all of the other organic competitors and jump to the very top. And the third reason to get excited is there's huge traffic value. And I'll prove this with some data. I'm not just going to make weird, wild, blind assertions. Sites are seeing 20 to 30% increases in organic traffic to URLs that appear in these featured snippets. And they often appear on SERPs that have high search volume. So I've convinced you, featured snippets are the bomb. Let's talk about what I actually want to talk about today. I have 3 things on my agenda. 1 is I want to explain our research methodology. 2 is I want to share the results of the research. And 3 is I want to leave you all with some things that you can do, some actual tactics that you can employ to get your own featured snippets. So to start with, the data. It's important to me that I explain to you all how we did the research, what our methodology is, so that you know that, hey, we actually know what we're talking about. You can trust our numbers. We don't have our heads up our own butts. We actually know what we're doing. So I'm going to leap right into that. This was a very, very large study for us. We used 1 million keywords. First of all, we had to source those. We used the 1 million queries with the highest cost per click from the GrepWords database. And if you guys don't know, GrepWords was a project that Russ Jones, who's now at Moz, was involved in. And funny enough, when Russ was putting that data set together, Stat contributed a large swath of keywords to it. So it was a nice sort of full circle moment for us to be able to pull that data and use that in our study. Once we had the 1 million queries, we had to go collect 1 million SERPs. This is easy for us. Anyone who is a customer of Stat can easily grab 1 million SERPs. It's not really a problem. The big challenge really is actually in parsing the SERPs, because we had to extract out the featured snippets and all the attributes of those snippets from the SERPs themselves. By the way, I should mention that there's a whole big white paper that we prepared that we'll be sending to all the attendees in their email in about a week's time, and there are sections in that white paper that go into how we actually extracted the featured snippets, including XPath examples. If that's your geeky thing, you'll be able to see that. For the record, this is what I'm talking about. This is a featured snippet. The key characteristic of a featured snippet is that it has a citation link to live web content where that answer is sourced from. Not to be confused with a knowledge graph snippet. A knowledge graph snippet is information that comes from Google's own proprietary maintained knowledge graph database. The key differentiator is that there is no citation link because there is no live web source that they're sourcing this information from. It comes from their own databases. So we looked at 1 million SERPs, we parsed them out, we analyzed them, and we found 93,832 featured snippets. Roughly 9.38% of all of our 1 million keywords had featured snippets on them. Once we had that, we started collecting on-page and off-site data. We collected the top 10 ranking URLs into SERPs where we saw featured snippets, and this gave us 346,643 unique URLs for us to parse. Once we had that information, we started looking at Fleisch-Kincaid readability scores, site speed, content density, site structure, schema markup, mobile experience, social experience, link profile, etc. Pretty robust study. And then we analyzed it all. Tableau and Excel were our tools of choice. I will say that as like a data geek, there's nothing more exhilarating than watching Excel just like crush 64 gigabytes of RAM. So Tableau was like a godsend. Okay, so that's the methodology. That's the basic premise of the research. In this section, I want to show you guys a few different types of snippets that we saw. I want to talk about some correlations we found with CPC, word length, search volume, and interestingly, I want to show you how snippets are really picky about what kind of results they co-occur with. So 3 core types of snippets. There's paragraph snippets. 81.95% of the total snippets we saw were paragraphs. 10.77% of them were lists. That's either bulleted or numbered lists. And then 7.28% of them were table snippets. This is an example of a paragraph snippet. What does cataract surgery cost? This is a list snippet. This one's bullets. They also appear in numbers. This is side effects of drugs. And here's a table snippet. Tables are often used for highly structured data like sports scores. As a bonus, this one also has an image. Speaking of images, out of all the snippets that we found, we saw that 27.58 of the snippets that we encountered had images. And here's the frequency of image appearance for different types of snippet types. So paragraph snippets, 28.40% had images. List snippets, 26.3% had images. Table, 17.7% had images. I'll do my best to not just recite numbers to you guys this entire time. This is really fascinating to us. In our entire data set, not once did we ever see featured snippets co-occur with places results. And this is because featured snippets are all about providing answers for informational queries, definitive answers for informational questions. Places results are about providing answers for questions that have high local intent. There are 2 different use cases and they never overlap. So not a single time did we ever see a places result and a featured snippet. Interestingly, we saw video and images quite a bit, but all those other more disruptive universal result types, shopping, flight finder, hotel finder, credit cards, mortgages, we didn't see a lot of overlap with different universal blended results with snippets, and that's fascinating to us because that shows that these are relatively pristine SERPs. These aren't the kind of SERPs where Google's bleeding your traffic off onto other Google properties, thus increasing the value of potentially ranking in a featured snippet. This graph shows us the frequency at which we saw featured snippets sourced from different ranking positions on the SERP. More than 70% of the featured snippets we saw came from positions other than the first position. This was a big like aha moment for us where we realized that hey, I can invest some effort and skip like the first 4 rankings on the SERP. I can be at position 5 and still appear at position 0, which would be that featured snippet position. This is the most boring graph on earth. It shows us that we didn't see any correlation with cost per click at all. Exciting. This is the influence of search volume, and we found a distinct trend that the higher the search volume, the more prevalent there were going to be featured snippets on those SERPs. Again, just bolstering the case for the fact that featured snippets are valuable and really worth going after because they're a great way to be at the very top of high search volume queries. Interestingly, here's the influence of word count in the query with the appearance of a featured snippet. There are featured snippets for queries like, what is CRM? That's a 3-word query. But lots of them are longer tail. They're things like, how do I fix my water heater in my house? So they're these longer kind of like fully articulated sentence structure type queries that trigger featured snippets. More prevalent at 6+ words than they are for head terms of 1 word or 2 words. This section is a little bit dense, and you'll have to forgive me, we're going to slog through it together. We put some effort into discovering and understanding the different types of words that trigger featured snippets. And we categorized those. So we looked at like finance words, time words, DIY words. The whole point for us was trying to determine what sort of words are likely to trigger or work against the triggering of a featured snippet. This data, the words here, are not actually from our study. This is an example for me to describe to you how we calculated that frequency. So if we have 1 million keywords, we took every single word and every query of all 1 million queries, and we broke them out separately. So if we saw the word LASIK like 3 times in our entire data set, and 2 of those times it occurred for a snippet, that's a 66% snippet frequency. If it was surgery and we had it 2 times in our total data set and 1 of those times you saw a snippet occurrence, that's 50%. Hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory. First up, math and finance words were the most prevalent words that we saw triggering featured snippets in our particular data set. Here's a featured snippet for average librarian salary, $56,170. Who knew? Now I know. I got lots of useless information in my brain from this research. That's one of them. These are words like average, salary, many, much, deductible, cost, and so on. Next most prevalent were time-related words. 46% of the time that we saw a time-related word, we saw a featured snippet for it. Here's an example, how often does a full moon occur? This one has an image as well. And there are words like often, years, deadline, last, when, age, etc. Health and healthcare-related words like symptoms. This one is symptoms of a fever. We saw words like psychologist, eat, symptoms, burn, heart, calories. Interestingly, this was the only place where we saw potential overlap with local intent keywords. When it came from people searching for things like veterinarians, psychologist, dentist, we saw those words trigger featured snippets, even though when those words are used in certain queries, they could be determined to have local intent. It was the only place we saw that minute overlap. Do you want to know what bay means before anyone else? Another piece of useless information that I have in my brain. General questions and transition words. It wasn't really a surprise to us that the word definition triggers a snippet, but what's interesting and what we learned was that featured snippets only get triggered for jargon definitions. So if I were to ask for a definition for the word arrogant, I would see a knowledge graph result that would have the Oxford English Dictionary definition. And then if I were to look for the definition for like mansplaining, I wouldn't actually get a knowledge graph. I would get a featured snippet because it's jargon. It's not in the knowledge graph. Google knows that you're asking for an answer, but if they don't have the answer in the knowledge graph, they're defaulting to a featured snippet. Forming, does, become, cause, definition. Some of those transition words that we saw were things like become a dentist, become a lawyer, etc. DIY process-related words like faucet. This one is fix hose faucet. As you can see, it's a numbered list with an image. What's neat about this is that we saw these sorts of queries triggering featured snippets when they're related to something that you would be doing at that exact moment. So like, I'm not a car guy. If I was trying to fix my muffler, I'd have my phone out and I'd be like, how do I fix my muffler? And then I might see a featured snippet. Google is showing us instant answers for instant questions that we have at the exact moment we have them, which to us indicates how featured snippets really are like a mobile-first phenomenon. Location words. You can see the extremely low frequency here. This is just proving that we really didn't see any featured snippets when it came to words that had local intent. When there are things like San, Vegas, Diego, Denver, Austin, Los, we almost never saw featured snippets. Subjective words. We almost never saw them for free, rankings, comparison, review, good, and you know what? The word best appeared in our data set over 20,000 times, and we never saw a featured snippet for it once. What's interesting there is because featured snippets are all about providing definitive answers to your questions. Words like these are used in queries where you're looking for subjective opinions. There's no overlap. There's no featured snippets for them when you're starting to ask for opinions and not things that have potentially definitive, high authority answers. And no surprise here, when we used image and video type words, we rarely saw featured snippets, rather we saw image packs, video results, etc. I have to kind of blast through this section. There was a whole bunch of depth and nuance in our research where we looked at the use of certain like HTML tags, we looked at site speed, mobile experience, readability scores, time to load. I just don't have time to go through it all with you today, so I picked 3 highlights that I'm gonna kind of breeze through. In the white paper that you all receive, there's much more depth, so if you're looking for some really wonderful late night reading to put you to sleep, you'll find some of that stuff there. When we saw table tags, 41.23% of the time that was for a featured snippet, 33.87% of the time it was just a regular result. When we saw OL tags, 43.85% of the time we saw that for a featured snippet, 30.97% of the time it was a regular result. And when we saw a matching either partial or exact match query in the H1 or H2 tags, 8.62% of the time that triggered a featured snippet, 7.11% of the time it was a regular result. And I could say there's just not enough time. There's a lot more information there that you guys can read into if you're interested. Like I say, we looked at the social media and the linking. That's one of the more interesting correlations we discovered that I just don't have time to fit in today. So now we get to the important stuff. How do you earn more featured snippets? Based on our research, I'm able to make a few confident recommendations that's just based on the patterns that we saw. Hopefully there are things that they don't require a lot of like a black magic for you to do. Anyone can kind of act on this advice. First of all, analyze your keyword opportunities. You're going to use things like Stat or SEMrush or even Google Search Console to look for target keywords. In Stat, you could filter to say, show me all of my, out of my 100,000 keywords I'm tracking, show me the ones where there are featured snippets. And then filter that list to say, show me the ones where I rank on the first page. That's going to be like a primary target list for you to attack because you're looking for keywords that Google has already displayed their intent to show featured snippets and you're already ranking on the first page and therefore you're in striking distance. The whole point is for you to come up with a list of keywords that you can prioritize in terms of perceived difficulty and perceived opportunity to decide which keywords you're going to target first. The second one is create strategic new content targeted at snippets. We did a lot of work into looking at the certain words that trigger featured snippets and the patterns therein, and you can use this information to decide how am I going to create content that's going to appear in those snippets. You don't really have to twist yourself into knots and do anything unnatural to make this happen. Try to find ways that really focus on delivering great value to the user, great user experience, but also incorporate words that are known quantities in terms of triggering featured snippets. An example would be cost. We saw the word cost. 42% of the time we saw the word cost, we saw it trigger a featured snippet. So if you were in the dental space, you might do some articles on how much do adult braces cost. 3, bring in question and answer formatting. Many of the featured snippets examples that we saw were single articles dedicated to answering a single question, and that seemed to work really well. Google seemed to reward that. Things like how to fix my water heater, the featured snippet was for an article that only answered that one thing. So when possible, think about that single purpose content, but it's not always possible. We did see content where there are multiple different answers on multiple different subjects all on one page, and we saw that content sourced for specific featured snippet boxes. So that is achievable, you can do that. What I would suggest is looking for your pages that have high organic performance, good traffic, great time on site, low bounce rate, and think about ways that you can incorporate FAQ or Q&A style content in those articles, hopefully getting that sourced into featured snippets. The key thing, I think, is to really focus on structure. Focus on using subheads and lists and breaking that content up and making it easy for Google to understand that this content is an answer to that question. That brings me to my next section, which is you have to slice up your content with copy, slice up your copy with subheads, lists, and tables. It's all about you making it easy for Google to figure out which data or which content is an answer to which question. So using H1 and H2 tags, using lists, using tables, and basically making it easy for Google to extract out that content and know what's related to what. Finally, polish your existing snippets for a higher click-through rate. And this is really fun, and you can get a little bit nefarious with this. An example would be, let's say you already own the featured snippet for a certain recipe and it has 4 steps in it. And all 4 steps are displayed in the featured snippet on the SERP. It's been proven that you can actually futz with the content that's in the featured snippet by updating your on-page content. So if you have a 4-step recipe that ranks in a featured snippet, why not go back and add 2 additional steps to it? Thus, when people look at it on the SERP, they're not going to see all the steps. They're more likely to click on that snippet to arrive at your website to get the full list of data that you actually provide for that recipe. There's a lot of fun that can be had with messing with Google once you actually have a featured snippet, if that's your idea of fun. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you guys enjoyed the data.
Thanks
We'll
so
say
much,
one
Rob.
thing. We open sourced all of the data. If you do want to look at all 1 million SERPs, getstat.com/data/fs. You can download it for yourself. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rob.